The crystalline halls of the Zathrin Palace gleamed with cold perfection. Every surface reflected light in sharp, angular patterns that hurt to look at for too long. Princess Lyra stood before the Emperor's throne, her body trembling beneath the weight of 1,000 judging eyes. The nobles lined the chamber walls, their slender frames draped in ceremonial robes, their faces twisted with barely concealed disgust as they stared at her. By her people's standards, she was malformed. Her frame was too round, her features too soft. Where other Zathrin were sharp and angular like the crystals their world was famous for, Lyra's body curved in ways that her people found repulsive. For 20 cycles, nearly her entire life, she had endured their whispers and sneers. The palace servants wouldn't meet her eyes. Her own siblings pretended she didn't exist at family gatherings. Even her mother, the Empress, looked away whenever Lyra entered a room. "You refuse Lord Vexmar?" The Emperor's voice echoed through the chamber like ice cracking under pressure. His 3 eyes narrowed to slits, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Lyra wanted to shrink into herself, to disappear, but she forced her spine straight. Her hearts pounded so hard she thought they might burst through her chest. The arranged marriage would have secured a military alliance with the Northern Territories, something the Empire desperately needed. Lord Vexmar was powerful, wealthy, and respected. Any other princess would have been honored. But Lyra had heard him talking to his advisors last week. She'd been walking past the council chambers when his voice drifted through the partially open door. "The unfortunate one," he'd called her. "At least she comes with a substantial dowry. I can keep her hidden away in the Eastern Wing. No one needs to see her at official functions." His companions had laughed. They'd actually laughed. Something inside Lyra had broken in that moment. Not her heart, that had been breaking slowly for 20 cycles. No, something deeper. Some last thread of hope that maybe, just maybe, someone might see her as more than a disappointment. "I refuse," she whispered, and the words felt like stepping off a cliff. The court gasped. The sound rippled through the chamber like a wave. Several nobles clutched their chests in shock. One elderly advisor actually fainted, though whether from surprise or excitement at the scandal, Lyra couldn't tell. The Emperor's face twisted with rage. His crystalline features darkened, shifting from clear blue to angry red. "You dare!" His voice rose to a roar. "You, who have been nothing but a burden to this family? You, who we have sheltered and fed despite your defects." Lyra flinched at the word. Defects. As if she were a broken tool, a flawed piece of equipment. "For 20 cycles, we have tolerated your presence," the Emperor continued, standing now, his robes sweeping around him like storm clouds. "We found you a match despite everything. Lord Vexmar was willing to overlook your appearance for the sake of the alliance. And this is how you repay our generosity." "Father, please," Lyra began, but he cut her off with a sharp gesture. "Do not call me that. You have forfeited the right." The Emperor's voice turned cold, calculating. A cruel smile spread across his face. "If you will not serve the Empire as a proper princess should, then you are no daughter of mine. You shall be cast out." Lyra's legs nearly gave way. Exile meant death for a royal. She had no survival skills, no way to make her own living. But the Emperor wasn't finished. "However, I am not without mercy." The way he said the word made it clear mercy had nothing to do with his next words. "You shall be given to a human. One of those primitive creatures who infest Harmony Station like vermin. A janitor, I think. Yes, perfect. Let the lesser species have you. Let them see what royal Zathrin blood looks like when it's tainted." The court erupted in shocked murmurs. Being given to a human was worse than death. Humans were considered barely civilized, crude creatures who didn't understand proper society. They were tolerated in the galaxy only because they bred quickly and worked cheap labor jobs no other species wanted. "Strip her of her title," the Emperor commanded. "Prepare her for transport. And make sure everyone knows why. Let this be a lesson to any other royal who thinks they can defy tradition." Guards moved forward, their faces blank. Lyra didn't resist as they took her arms. What would be the point? She'd made her choice. She'd chosen dignity over duty, self-respect over security. As they led her away, she heard the nobles already beginning to gossip, their voices excited and cruel. This would be talked about for generations. Princess Lyra, the malformed one, who refused her duty and was cast out to live among humans. She didn't cry. She'd run out of tears years ago. Instead, she held her head high as they marched her toward an uncertain future, toward a species she'd never met, toward a male whose name she didn't even know. At least, She thought, it couldn't be worse than this. Tyler's quarters were nothing like the palace. Where Lyra had spent her life surrounded by cold crystal walls that stretched up forever, this place was small and warm. The ceiling was low enough that she could almost touch it with her three-fingered hand. The walls were painted a soft cream color, not the harsh reflective surfaces she was used to. Everything felt close, contained, almost cozy in a way that the palace had never been. Strange human objects filled every available space. Photographs in frames showed Tyler with other humans, all of them smiling in ways that looked genuine. Not the forced, polite smiles of court functions, but real happiness. There were books, actual physical books with worn covers and dog-eared pages, not the data crystals her people used. In the corner sat something she'd never seen before, a wooden instrument with strings stretched across it. Later, she would learn it was called a guitar. The moment they arrived, Tyler had insisted she take his bedroom. Not asked, insisted. "You've had a rough few days," he'd said, gathering his things. "You need proper rest. I'll take the couch. It's actually pretty comfortable." Lyra had started to protest, but he was already moving, pulling blankets from a closet, setting up his sleeping area in the small living space. He moved with easy efficiency, like this was the most natural thing in the world, giving up his bed for someone he'd just met. Now, an hour later, he was scrolling through his datapad, his forehead wrinkled in concentration. "I don't know what your people eat," he admitted, glancing up at her. His brown eyes were kind, concerned. "But the station has a pretty good selection. There's foods from maybe 30 different species here. What sounds good?" Lyra stared at him, unable to form words for a moment. "You're asking me?" Tyler looked genuinely confused by her surprise. "Yeah? You're the one eating it. I mean, I could guess, but I'd probably get it wrong. Better to just ask, right?" In the palace, meals had been predetermined. Portion sizes were measured. The kitchen staff prepared what the dietitian said was appropriate for her, which was always less than everyone else received. No one had ever asked what she wanted. She scrolled through the options on his datapad, her hands shaking slightly. Everything looked foreign, strange. She chose 3 items carefully, expecting him to comment on her selections, to tell her it was too much or the wrong choices. Instead, Tyler nodded and doubled the order. "Figured you might want to try a few things," he explained, tapping the screen to confirm. "New place, new foods. And hey, I'm not gonna judge your appetite. Eat however much makes you happy. If you're still hungry after, we'll order more." The food arrived 30 minutes later, brought by a delivery bot. Tyler spread everything out on the small table, pulling up a second chair for himself. He'd ordered his own meal, something that smelled rich and savory. That night, as Lyra ate her first meal without shame in years, she watched this human janitor move around his small kitchen. He hummed while cleaning dishes, some tune she didn't recognize but that sounded cheerful. His movements were relaxed, comfortable. He didn't stare at her body, sizing up her frame like the palace nobles did. Didn't comment on her portions or watch to see how much she ate. He just existed peacefully alongside her, washing dishes and humming like this was any ordinary evening. It was the strangest, most wonderful thing she'd ever experienced. When she finished eating, and she did finish everything, because it was delicious and he'd meant it about not judging, Tyler brought her a glass of something cool and sweet. "Human drink," he explained. "Lemonade. It's good after a meal. But if you don't like it, no pressure." She tried it. The tartness made her blink, but the sweetness that followed was pleasant. She took another sip. Tyler smiled and went back to his cleaning. "Tyler?" she asked hesitantly, setting down the glass. "Yeah?" He turned, dish towel in hand. "Why did you accept me?" The question had been burning in her mind since the cargo bay. The Zathrin made it clear this was meant to humiliate us both. The ambassador practically announced it to the entire docking area. "You could have refused. I heard them offer you compensation to refuse." Tyler dried his hands slowly, thinking about his answer. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. "Honestly? Because you looked scared." He met her eyes directly. "I saw you standing there in those fancy robes, and you just looked terrified. And I figured, the worst thing I could do was prove those ambassadors right about humans being barbaric or cruel or whatever they think we are." He leaned back in his chair. "Also, I've been around the galaxy enough to know that what some species consider flaws or imperfections, others consider beautiful. Different isn't wrong. It's just different." He shrugged. "And I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but you seem like a decent person who got dealt a bad hand. Figured the least I could do was be decent back." Lyra felt her eyes burning with tears. Not the bitter tears she'd cried in the palace, but something different. Something that felt almost like hope. Plus, Tyler added, his tone lighter, you seem interesting. I'd like to get to know you, if you're comfortable with that. No pressure. You can keep to yourself if you want. But if you want company, I'm here. That night, lying in Tyler's bed, which smelled clean and felt softer than anything in the palace, Lyra realized something. For the first time in 20 cycles, someone had treated her like she mattered. Like her preferences and feelings were important. Like she was worth asking questions to instead of making decisions for. Lyra's garden grew. What started as a simple terrarium on the corner table had expanded into something much bigger. Small shoots pushed through the soil, unfurling into vibrant leaves in shades of purple and green that didn't exist together in nature on any single world. Her quarters had transformed into a living laboratory, plants covering every available surface. Vines crept along the walls. Flowering specimens sat in careful rows on shelves Tyler had installed. The air smelled like growing things, like earth and life. Tyler helped her catalog everything. His careful human hands moved with surprising gentleness as he held delicate stems while she examined root structures under a borrowed microscope. He asked questions constantly, genuinely curious about the differences between species. Why did this one need more water? What made that flower bloom only at night? He took notes in a physical notebook, his handwriting messy but enthusiastic. You're really good at this, he said one evening, watching her cross-pollinate 2 specimens with a tiny brush. Her 3-fingered hands moved with absolute precision, transferring pollen from one flower to another in careful, measured strokes. Lyra felt warmth spread through her chest at the compliment. She'd been living with Tyler for almost 2 months now, and she still wasn't used to praise. I used to read forbidden texts in the palace library, she admitted, not looking up from her work. Late at night, when everyone was asleep. The head librarian was old and kind. She'd leave certain books out for me, pretending she'd forgotten to reshelve them. Tyler leaned against the table, interested. Forbidden texts about plants. About botany, yes. It was considered beneath royalty. Lyra set down her brush and finally met his eyes. The Zathrin royal family is supposed to focus on politics, military strategy, and maintaining appearances. My tutors wanted me to spend my time on etiquette lessons and learning to walk gracefully. They wanted me to focus on looking presentable. She paused, the old pain flickering across her face. Which I never could. The quarters went quiet except for the gentle hum of the air recyclers and the soft drip of the watering system Tyler had rigged up for her. Tyler frowned, that expression he got when something bothered him deeply. That's their loss. He pushed off from the table and came to stand beside her. You know, on Earth, beauty standards are all over the place. What's considered attractive in one country is completely different in another. And it changes constantly, different eras, different trends. In some periods of history, people who looked like you would have been considered the ideal. In others, completely different. He gestured around at the plants surrounding them. There's this whole thing about how beauty is subjective. Some people like roses, some people like orchids. Some think dandelions are weeds, others think they're wishes waiting to be made. Doesn't make any of them less valuable as plants. Lyra found herself smiling despite the heaviness in her chest. Are you comparing me to a dandelion? Maybe? Is that offensive? I didn't mean. Tyler looked worried for a moment, then saw her smile and relaxed. I'm saying different doesn't mean wrong. It just means different. He met her eyes then, and his expression became serious, earnest. For what it's worth, I think you're beautiful. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. Her heart started beating faster, that double rhythm that humans found strange but Tyler had gotten used to. You're just being kind. I'm being honest. Tyler's voice was steady, firm. You've got these amazing eyes, all 3 of them. They catch the light in this way that's mesmerizing. And your skin, with those crystalline patterns? When the sun hits you through the window in the mornings, you literally sparkle. Do you know how incredible that is? Lyra wanted to look away but couldn't. No one had ever spoken to her like this. And your laugh, Tyler continued, warming to his subject. That's my favorite part, honestly. When you really laugh, not that polite princess laugh you probably had to do at court functions, but when something genuinely amuses you. It's like music. It's this cascading sound that makes me want to smile even if I don't know what's funny. She felt tears pricking at her eyes. Tyler. I'm not done. He grinned. Your hands, I love watching you work. You're so precise, so careful with everything you touch. And the way you talk about plants? Your whole face lights up. You get animated and excited and you forget to be self-conscious. That's when you're most beautiful, when you're being yourself without worrying what anyone thinks. A tear rolled down Lyra's face, leaving a glittering trail. On her species, tears crystallized quickly, turning into tiny gems. Tyler had been startled the first time he'd seen it happen. On my world, she said quietly, I was told I was wrong. My whole life. Everything about me was wrong. My shape, my interests, my choices. And then I come here, to this tiny room with a human janitor, and suddenly. She trailed off, overwhelmed. Suddenly you're not wrong, Tyler finished gently. You never were, Lyra. They were wrong about you. She turned fully toward him then, setting aside her work. How do you do that? Do what? Make me feel like I matter. Like I'm worth something. Tyler's expression softened. Because you do matter. And you are worth something. Anyone who couldn't see that was looking at you with broken eyes, not the other way around. News of their happiness reached the Zathrin homeworld like a virus spreading through a computer system. Someone had posted a photo on the station's public network, Tyler and Lyra in her garden, laughing over a plant that had grown 3 heads instead of 1. She was leaning against him, relaxed and genuinely joyful. He had his arm around her shoulders, completely comfortable, completely at ease. The photo went viral across multiple species networks. Humans shared it with captions like "Love wins," and "This is what it's all about." Other species commented on the botanical oddity in the background. But the Zathrin saw something different. They saw their disgraced princess, the one who was supposed to suffer in humiliation, looking happier than she'd ever looked in the palace. The Emperor was enraged. His punishment had backfired spectacularly. Instead of being broken by shame, Lyra was thriving. Instead of confirming humanity's barbarism, this janitor had treated her with more respect than her own family ever had. The story was making the Zathrin Empire look cruel and backwards, and other species were starting to ask uncomfortable questions about how the Zathrin treated their own people. Within a week, an official Zathrin delegation arrived at Harmony Station. The ambassador who'd originally delivered Lyra swept into the station commander's office with an entire entourage, their crystalline robes clicking as they moved. Tyler and Lyra were summoned to hear the Emperor's decree. The ambassador's 3 eyes glittered with cold satisfaction as he unrolled an official document, the crystal parchment catching the light. His voice was formal, dripping with malice. By order of Emperor Vextrin VII, Princess Lyra is hereby declared royal property who has abandoned her sacred duties to the Empire. She is commanded to return immediately to face charges of treason against the throne. Lyra's hands went cold. Tyler's arm tightened around her waist. The penalty for such treason, the ambassador continued, clearly enjoying himself, is execution. She has 7 days to present herself to the imperial court, or bounty hunters will be authorized to retrieve her by any means necessary. Station Commander Ellis, a tough woman who'd served in the human military for 20 years, stood up from behind her desk. You can't be serious. You gave her away. You called her worthless. You can't just decide she's property now that she's happy. Zathrin law is clear, the ambassador said smoothly. Royalty cannot abdicate without the Emperor's permission. She remains property of the Empire. Tyler's response was immediate. The moment the delegation left, he was on his communication terminal, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He contacted every human colony he could find contact information for. He reached out to sympathetic species, the Zentari, who valued logic over tradition, the Kelrics, who'd fought their own war for individual rights 3 generations ago, the peaceful Meraxi, who believed all life was sacred. He sent messages to journalists, activists, anyone who might listen. And he crafted their story carefully, making sure everyone understood what was really happening. A princess punished for her appearance. A janitor who loved her. An empire that treated sentient beings as property and punished happiness like it was a crime. The story spread faster than anyone anticipated. Human networks exploded with outrage. Video clips of Lyra's testimony, she'd agreed to be interviewed, went viral across dozens of species. She spoke quietly but clearly about the abuse, the starvation diets disguised as health regimens, the constant mockery, the isolation. Other Zathrins started coming forward too, those who'd fled the Empire's rigid standards. They shared similar stories of persecution, of being deemed imperfect and cast out or hidden away. Within 3 days, the Galactic Council agreed to hear the case. It was unprecedented, the Council rarely interfered in internal species matters. But the public pressure was enormous, and the question had grown bigger than just one princess. If the Zathrin could declare someone property and demand their return for execution, what did that mean for individual rights across the galaxy? The hearing was held in the council chambers, a massive room that could hold representatives from 200 species. Tyler stood at the speaker's podium, his hands gripping the edges so hard his knuckles turned white. He'd never been good at public speaking. He was a janitor, not a diplomat. But Lyra was sitting behind him, flanked by human lawyers who'd volunteered their services, and that gave him courage. Humanity doesn't do that, he told the council, his voice shaking but determined. He looked at the assembled representatives, these beings from across the galaxy, and spoke from his heart. We don't measure worth by looks. We don't judge people's value by whether they fit some narrow standard of perfection. We don't give people away as punishments like they're objects. And we sure as hell don't let love be a crime. He gestured back to Lyra. She fell in love. That's what they want to execute her for. Not treason, love. Because she dared to be happy with someone they didn't approve of. Because she dared to choose her own path instead of the one they laid out for her. Tyler's voice grew stronger. Where I come from, we have a saying, all people are created equal. Every human is taught from childhood that you don't own other people. You don't treat them like property. You don't measure their worth by what they look like or whether they're convenient for you. He paused, letting his words sink in. I'm just a janitor. I clean floors. I fix broken toilets. I'm nobody important. But even I know that what the Zathrin Empire is doing is wrong. And if this council allows it, what does that say about all of us? The council chamber fell silent as Chief Arbiter Cal stood to deliver the verdict. The massive alien, whose species had been mediating galactic disputes for over 1,000 years, looked out over the assembled representatives with his 6 eyes. Tyler held his breath. Lyra's 3-fingered hand squeezed his so tightly it hurt. This council has deliberated on the matter of Princess Lyra of the Zathrin Empire. Kel's voice boomed through the chamber, translated instantly into hundreds of languages. We have reviewed the evidence, heard testimonies, and examined the ancient laws cited by the Zathrin delegation. The Zathrin ambassador sat rigid in his seat, confident in his empire's legal standing. However, Cal continued, and that single word changed everything. This council finds that no law, no matter how ancient, supersedes the fundamental rights of sentient beings. No species may declare another sentient being as property. No government may transfer individuals against their will as punishment or otherwise. The chamber began to stir. The ambassador's face darkened from blue to angry purple. Therefore, Cal announced, his voice rising, this council finds that Princess Lyra is granted full autonomy as a free individual. She owes no allegiance to the Zathrin Empire. She faces no charges. She is free to live where she chooses, with whom she chooses. Tyler felt his knees go weak with relief. Furthermore, Cal wasn't finished. The Zathrin Empire will face immediate sanctions until substantial reforms are implemented regarding the treatment of citizens who do not conform to appearance-based standards. A council monitoring team will be assigned to ensure compliance. The chamber erupted. Representatives from dozens of species began shouting, some in celebration, others in protest. The human delegation jumped to their feet, cheering. The Zathrin ambassador stood abruptly, his entourage scrambling to follow as he stormed out. Lyra collapsed into Tyler's arms, her body shaking with sobs. But these weren't tears of fear or shame. These were tears of relief so profound it hurt. Crystalline droplets fell from her eyes, scattering across Tyler's maintenance uniform like tiny diamonds. He held her tight, one hand cradling her head, whispering that it was over, she was safe, they were safe. But their work wasn't finished. That night, as they celebrated with friends at a small restaurant on Harmony Station, someone approached their table. She was Zathrin, younger than Lyra, her frame even rounder. She was crying. Thank you, the young woman whispered. I've been hiding on this station for 2 years, terrified they'd find me and drag me back. But now maybe I can actually live. That's when Lyra and Tyler realized the verdict was bigger than just them. Over the next week, more Zathrin appeared. Then members of other species who'd faced similar persecution. A Kelrix male whose antlers grew in the wrong pattern. A Zentari female whose coloring was considered impure. A Meraxi whose singing voice didn't meet their species' exacting standards. They all had the same question, what now? Tyler and Lyra looked at each other across their small quarters, now overflowing with plants and people, and made a decision. Together, they founded the Dignity Accord, a coalition dedicated to protecting refugees fleeing appearance-based persecution. They started small, just helping people find housing on Harmony Station, connecting them with sympathetic employers, providing emotional support. But word spread fast. Within 6 months, they had chapters on 15 stations. Human colonies were particularly welcoming, offering asylum and citizenship to anyone the Accord vouched for. Other species followed suit. The Zentari offered scholarships for refugees wanting education. The Miraxi provided free counseling services. Lyra threw herself into both the Accord and her botanical research. Her work on cross-species agriculture became groundbreaking. She discovered that certain plant combinations could thrive in environments that had previously been considered impossible to farm. Stations that had relied entirely on imported food could now grow their own. Colony worlds on the edge of habitable zones suddenly became viable. Her research papers were published in prestigious journals. Universities offered her teaching positions. She was invited to speak at conferences across the galaxy. The disgraced princess had become Dr. Lyra Bennett, renowned xenobotanist and humanitarian. But Tyler continued his maintenance work. When people suggested he should take a better position, maybe work in administration or public relations for the Accord, he just shook his head. It's honest labor, he insisted, and he meant it. He took pride in keeping the stations running, in making sure the air recyclers hummed smoothly and the water system stayed clean. He'd been promoted to managing maintenance teams across 3 stations now, but he still got his hands dirty. Still fixed broken pipes himself. Still showed new janitors the right way to clean solar panels. Someone's got to do it, he'd say with a shrug. Might as well be someone who does it right. Lyra loved that about him. In a galaxy obsessed with status and prestige, Tyler remained exactly who he'd always been, a good man who did good work and didn't need recognition to feel worthwhile. 5 years after the council's verdict, their modest quarters had expanded into a proper home. Their children, 2 hybrid youngsters named Maya and James, played in Lyra's research gardens, their skin shifting between crystalline and human tones depending on the light. They had Tyler's brown eyes and Lyra's 3-fingered hands, and they were growing up knowing they were loved unconditionally. The terrarium Tyler had first bought Lyra now sat in a museum on Earth, donated as a symbol of where it all started. In its place was a research facility where dozens of scientists worked on projects that would feed millions. A Zathrin delegation arrived one morning, but these weren't ambassadors. They were refugees, former nobles who'd escaped after the reform movements overthrew the emperor. They brought news. The rigid appearance standards were being dismantled. Citizens were no longer persecuted for looking different. The empire was changing, slowly but surely. You started this, one said to Lyra, an older male whose frame was similar to hers. By refusing to be ashamed. By showing us there was another way. Lyra smiled, taking Tyler's hand. No. He started it. By loving me when no one else would. By showing me that kindness isn't weakness and compassion isn't primitive. Tyler squeezed her hand. I didn't do anything special. I just saw you. The real you. Exactly, Lyra whispered. That evening, as the station's artificial sunset painted their windows gold, they sat in their garden. The janitor and the princess. The human and the alien. 2 souls who'd found each other across the vastness of space and proven something powerful. That love sees worth where others see only shame, that kindness can change worlds, and that sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply treating someone with the dignity they deserve.